Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, and today it's review time once again. This is the M4 Thunderbolt 7. This is the personal tank of Lieutenant Colonel Creighton William Abrams Jr., the commanding officer of the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armoured Division, which was continually used as the spearhead of General George S. Patton Jr.'s 3rd Army all the way throughout World War II. And was the first American unit to reach the besieged 101st Airborne in Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge and break the siege of that city. General George Patton was a hard man to please and an even harder man to earn praise from, and yet he said of Creighton Abrams, "I'm supposed to be the best tank commander in the army, but I have one peer, Abe Abrams. He's the world champion." Born on the 15th of September 1914 in Springfield, Massachusetts, Abrams was an unremarkable student at the West Point Military Academy of the US Army, where he graduated 185th out of a class of nearly 300. Early on in the development of the armoured branch, Abrams decided that tanks were the way ahead, and he was appointed a company commander in the 4th Armoured Division in 1940. And this was where he would christen his first tank, an M4 Sherman, the Thunderbolt. Abrams would eventually finish the war in command of his 7th M4 Sherman tank, the Thunderbolt 7, and that's the tank that's being introduced into World of Tanks as a premium. He never had any tank shot out from underneath him. He actually wore 6 of these tanks out, and when you look at the legendary durability and reliability of the M4 Sherman, you get some idea of exactly how hard he drove his tanks and his men. This didn't mean that Abrams didn't care about the welfare of his men. Quite the opposite, but he was definitely a firm student of the General George S. Patton School of Leadership. The best way to keep your men alive in combat is to kill as many of the enemy as possible in as short a time as possible. Abrams has been quoted as telling his tank commanders, "We don't want the Germans to fall back, we want them to hold their position so we can destroy them and their equipment. Whenever the Germans get us in the ringer, they show us no quarter, so why should we?" One of his company commanders in the 4th Armoured Division, Captain Abe Baum, said of Abrams, "He was sincere, honest, didn't speak down to people. In 8 to 10 words he could put more emphasis than someone who spoke for an hour. He led his troops, he didn't have a headquarters out there in his lead tank, instead he was another gun in the tank." And it was in fact often the case that if you wanted to find the commanding officer of the 37th Tank Battalion, then just go to the head of the column, and there he would be in the lead tank, standing in the turret, scanning the hedgerows, looking for Germans. During September 1944 at the Battle of Arrancourt, which ranked as one of the biggest tank-on-tank engagements on the Western Front, if not the entire Second World War, certainly the tank battles on the Eastern Front were considerably larger. But the 37th Tank Battalion participated in the destruction of over 55 German Panther and Tiger tanks, while suffering only 14 losses of its own. Thunderbolt 7, the tank in which Abrams finished World War II, and the only one of his tanks that survived World War II, he wore the rest out underneath him, is the one that's been modelled here in World of Tanks as a premium Tier 6 American medium tank. The Thunderbolt 7 is the 12th American premium medium tank to be introduced into the game, although it's only the second Tier 6, the first being the M4 Fury. The tank is a fairly standard M4A3 76W HVSS tank, although it does have a lot of field modifications. Like a lot of others in the 3rd Army, it was modified with salvaged armour plate on the hull as turret, as well as a lot of additional machine guns, although these aren't obviously modelled in World of Tanks. And they were created to meet a great demand for the Sherman Jumbos, which the US Armoured Divisions just couldn't get enough of. In a quote from Steven Zaloga's Armoured Thunderbolt, the US Army Sherman in World War II book, which is a fantastic book by the way, and which I cannot recommend enough, even Patton couldn't resist the growing clamour for better armour protection in the wake of the Battle of the Bulge, so he demanded that his ordnance officers come up with a better solution. The method was obvious: weld on more armour plate. In February 1945, Patton ordered that all M4A3 76mm in his units be fitted with additional front hull armour as well as turret armour if possible. With the 3rd Army's Ordnance battalions already overworked, much of the work was handed over to 3 Belgian factories near Bastogne. The tanks of 3 armoured divisions, the 4th, 6th and 11th, were modified in this fashion, an average of 36 tanks per division out of their 168 Shermans. The programme was both technically successful and very popular with the tank crews blessed with this applique armour. A 6th Armoured Division tank recalled how shortly after his M4A3E8 had been fitted with the armour in February 1945, his tank was hit by a 75mm shell from a German armoured vehicle, which knocked a piece of the applique armour from the hull, but did not penetrate the tank. Patton had a number of salvaged M4s acquired from the neighbouring 7th Army and had them cannibalised for armour plate. This would result in doubled or nearly doubled frontal armour and side armour, going from just behind the upper glacis to just in front of the engine compartment, roughly where the ammunition bin is on the M4A2. The extra armour would extend to cover the transmission housing, although it would have a weak spot at the ball mount for the whole machine gun. The gun mantlet would be of standard thickness, so it would be a weak spot compared to the Sherman Jumbo, and the rear of the vehicle isn't any more protected than the standard M4A3. Obviously, one consideration with all this extra armour weight is going to be the mobility of the tank. However, the M4 HVSS did have significantly wider tracks than the Sherman Jumbo. The Sherman Jumbo's tracks were only 16 inches wide, or 20 inches wide if fitted with cleats. The HVSS had tracks that were 23 inches wide, which meant it had much better ground resistance, and would therefore be able to better spread the load of that extra weight over the ground on which it was travelling. Now, exact figures of the weight of the modified Shermans are very hard to come by, but theoretically they should still be significantly lighter than the Sherman Jumbo equipped with a standard turret, and therefore still retain better mobility. So, that's the history of the tank in a nutshell. What's it like in the game? Let's take a look. And there she is. Now, those extra armour plates that you can see welded to the side of the tank count as 30mm of spaced armour, as does the applique armour, which you can see on the turret cheeks, 30mm thick and spaced. The extra armour applied to the front of the tank varies in both thickness and angle. The actual thickness of the various different armour plates varies anything between 110 and 123.5mm of actual armour thickness, but the armour is sloped back at angles of at least 45 degrees, which means that the effective thickness, if you leave aside the obvious weak spot there where the whole machine gun is sticking out, varies anything between 171 and over 210mm thick. Likewise, the gun mantlet, which is spaced armour and consists of over 170mm of effective armour thickness. The armour on this tank is very good for a tier 6 medium, and yet, well, you are still just a tier 6 medium and you only have 750 health. It is inadvisable to go playing chicken with Russian heavies on with those 122mm guns, because if they do penetrate your armour, you've just lost half of your health. Nevertheless, I have had a lot of fun in this tank, facing other tanks that think, oh, it's just a Sherman, and watching them harmlessly bounce shots off the front of this very well armoured medium tank. While that extra frontal armour is very welcome, it does of course come with a price, and that's the mobility. While it is still more mobile than a Sherman Jumbo, this is not a fast tank. It wasn't particularly fast to begin with, with a top speed of only 42 km/h. The mobility is worse than the Easy 8, it's worse than the Sherman Fury, although it is mitigated somewhat by the fact that these extra wide tracks do have better ground resistance. Which is a kind of shame, although I suppose it's only fair, because when you've got this much armour up front, you have to pay for it somewhere, because the other mobility stats on the tank are actually pretty good. Both the hull and turret traverse are over 40 degrees per second, but it does not handle hills very well at all, as you can quite plainly see here. With that hull and turret traverse, however, what that means is that on level ground at least, this tank is going to be a very good brawling dogfighter of a medium tank. Just try to avoid going over any inclines or bumps in the ground, because this tank will slow down drastically if you have to do that. Then of course we come to the firepower, which is a fairly critical component when it comes to a tank, because at the end of the day shooting things is what these things are for. And there are absolutely no surprises as far as the gun on the Thunderbolt 7 is concerned. It's a Sherman 76 HVSS. It has the 76mm M1A2. Fairly standard gun on American medium tanks at tier 6. Even the Sherman Jumbo has this gun as an option. It's the same gun that you get on the Sherman Fury. It's the same gun that you get on the Easy 8. It does have slightly better aiming time, however, than this gun on the Fury, which has a 2.3 second aiming time. And on the Easy 8, the Thunderbolt 7 and the Sherman Jumbo, if you were to fit the Sherman Jumbo with a 76mm gun, also has the 2.1 second aiming time. The accuracy of .38 is not fantastic, but it's no worse than any other American medium tank at tier 6 that carries this gun. Having said that, I've managed to get the accuracy with a well-trained crew down to .36, which is perfectly acceptable, and the gun handling stats are not bad. This is of course aided by the fact that you can fit this tank with a vertical stabilizer. Nevertheless, you are going to miss shots when firing the 76mm gun on this tank. Luckily, that's not going to be too much of an issue thanks to the monstrous rate of fire. Again, with a well-trained crew, and without using premium consumables, I've managed to get the reload on this 76mm gun down to 3.04 seconds. With premium consumables, this tank would be firing a shot less than every 3 seconds. Now, you combine that with the very tough gun mantlet and the 10 degrees of gun depression, which is very welcome and fairly typical of American Tier 6 medium tanks, and it means that this tank is absolutely fantastic when it comes to poking ridgelines and punishing other tanks that don't have the same kind of rate of fire as you. And with that frontal armour, you can even risk taking a hit or two. So, what do I think of this tank, and would I recommend it as a purchase? Because it is a premium tank after all, and the answer to that question is going to depend on a number of factors. First of all, how many other American premium medium tanks do you own? Because this is the 12th one now that's been introduced to World of Tanks, and while some of those tanks are out of reach of mere mortals like you and I, because they're Clan Wars reward tanks for example, that still leaves an awful lot of American premium medium tanks which are available for purchase. You've got the Fury, you've got the T-25 Pilot, you've got the Super Pershing, you've got the M46 Patton Korea, you've even got the Ram 2 down at Tier 5. And a lot of those tanks are Tier 8 premiums, and therefore they're going to earn a heck of a lot more money than a Tier 6 premium. I mean, you're going to struggle to lose money, unless you're puking premium ammunition, in the Thunderbolt 7, but it's still not going to have the same credit earning potential as a Tier 8 premium like the Super Pershing. And the Super Pershing is an interesting comparison with this tank, because like the Thunderbolt 7, the Super Pershing has lots and lots and lots of frontal armour. But the Super Pershing's mobility is absolutely terrible, and the Thunderbolt 7's is not. It's not fantastic, but it's certainly not bad. Now, I absolutely detest playing the Super Pershing because of that terrible mobility. I like a tank with some mobility, but I'm just not a good enough player to be able to take full advantage of a tank with exceptionally good mobility. I mean, I enjoy playing them, but I certainly can't play them to their full advantage because I'm just not good enough at World of Tanks. And in that respect, I suspect I'm probably in the same boat as the majority of people watching my World of Tanks videos. I mean, we're good enough to recognise greatness when we see it, even if we know we're never ever going to be able to emulate it. And so a tank like the Thunderbolt 7 is about as mobile as I'm actually able to take full advantage of in the first place. And unlike other American mediums at this tier and above, it's actually got very, very good armour. Well, okay, there's the Sherman Jumbo as well, but the Sherman Jumbo is a slow tank too, and the Thunderbolt is not. You won't be storming up hills in this thing like you can in the M48 Patton, but, you know, this is not a slow tank. Oh, it also has very, very good view range, by the way, which is something which I neglected to mention earlier. Now, I couldn't cap the view range at 445 metres in this thing, although I would be able to if I was using premium consumables, but with coated optics and relevant crew skills, I have managed to get the view range up to 439 metres, which is as close to the cap as I can get without using premium consumables. And is why I'm scouting the middle of the map here, because none of our light tanks wanted to do it. And here's the armour at work. M41 Bulldog, he thinks, oh, it's just a Sherman. I'll take him apart. Actually, I don't think you will. Not with the frontal armour on this thing, you won't, sunshine. This happened quite a lot. Because people have never seen the Thunderbolt before, they look at it and they think, it's just a Sherman, no problem. Why are my shots bouncing? Yeah, this Bulldog was not having any luck with the spaced applique armour on the front of this tank's hull and turret. This tank is basically a Tier 6 Super Pershing. All of that armour at the front, and a pretty good gun for its tier. But like the Super Pershing, it doesn't have any armour at the rear, 38mm. And I'm about to get into a lot of trouble with this AMX-12T. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, Jingles, turn all that frontal armour around to face him, and well, I would have done that if not for two reasons. One, I expected to have killed this guy by now with my 3-second reload, and now I'm attracting fire not just from the AMX-12T, and also I didn't really want to turn the back of my tank towards that Bulldog. Which, in retrospect, I probably should have done and taken the risk, because that 12T caused me all kinds of problems. There he goes, the little bugger. He's obviously reloading now. Oh no, crap, he has reloaded, but I've got him. And bounced a shot from a tank destroyer in the bargain. Meanwhile... what is that Cromwell doing? Well, far be it from me to interrupt somebody when he's making a mistake. We're going to finish him off. Now I have lost a lot of health here, so I am going to need to be careful. Never forget that you might have all that extra frontal armour, but you do only have 750 health. You're still, at the end of the day, just a tier 6 medium tank, and this is a tier 8 battle. But here's the thing, and this is the reason why I really like the Thunderbolt 7, because if I'd been in any other American tier 6 medium tank, or even an American tier 7 medium tank, in that particular situation I'd be dead by now, because the Bulldog would have penetrated and would have damaged me. His 76mm gun has 175mm of penetration. No other American tier 6 medium can reliably expect to bounce shots from a gun like that from the front, but the Thunderbolt 7 can. And there's another American light tank with a 76mm gun, and he has even less chance of beating my frontal armour than the Bulldog did. The T-71 has a 76mm gun with 145mm of penetration. Providing I can get the front of the tank pointing towards him, because I have been spotted, and with a better than 40°/s hull traverse, getting the front of the tank pointed towards an incoming threat is not going to be too difficult in this tank. He is going to have next to no chance of penetrating my frontal armour with his standard APCR ammunition, unless he loads his premium APCR ammunition, which has 210mm of penetration, and he didn't, and he's dead. Despite the fact that that guy was an autoloader, and I need to move now because I'm on very low health and all. Yep, there's the artillery. Didn't hit, but I did suffer the stun effect from the splash damage. But yes, the T-71's an autoloader. I can't remember exactly how many rounds he has in his magazine, but even though this tank doesn't have an autoloader, it's just a standard 76mm anti-tank gun, the rate of fire is almost as good as the T-71's. And in this thing, you don't have to run away and hide while you're reloading once you've expended the clip. I guess what I'm saying here is that if you're not that good at World of Tanks, you're probably going to really enjoy the Thunderbolt 7. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because I'm not that good at World of Tanks. This tank has armour, which is not something that you can say of any other American tier 6 medium other than the Jumbo. And it's got better mobility than the Jumbo. It's got just about enough mobility that I can fully take advantage of as a Joe average World of Tanks player. When you see those replays in super mobile Soviet tier 10 mediums, for example, where people are just so good at the game that, you know, you watch a guy like Mr. Crow or Orzenel or Quickie Baby or Circumflexes, and you're just in awe of how they handle the tank. Most of us, myself included, are never going to be that good at driving a tank, so the superb mobility offered by some of the tanks in the game is just wasted on us. What we need is a tank that's got decent mobility and some armour, because we're going to make mistakes. And if you make mistakes in a tank that doesn't have any armour, you're going to get punished for it. But a tank that does have some armour, and the Thunderbolt does have good armour, you can afford to get away with making some of those mistakes and not immediately get sent back to the garage because of it. And that's why I firmly believe that this tank is going to be very, very popular. Because let's face it, most of us do make mistakes when we're playing World of Tanks, and with only 750 health, you're going to get shot at by, well, how can I put this? That Bulldog is not the only tank that you're likely to face that has 175mm of penetration. Soviet heavies have 122mm guns with 175mm of penetration, while I would not recommend that you play chicken with a Soviet heavy tank, because if he does hit and penetrate you, you're going to be, oh hang on, crap, oh, well that was a spot of luck. Spotted by the IKV-90. He has a 90mm gun with 210mm of penetration. Bounced, I think, off my gun mantlet. But yes, I wouldn't recommend playing chicken in this thing with Soviet heavy tanks, because at the end of the day, you can't really afford to take the risk of losing half of your health. But if you have to play chicken with a Soviet heavy tank in this thing, if you have no other option, well, you do have the option, because you've got all of that frontal armour. You don't really have that option in the Fury. You don't have that option in the Easy 8, because a Soviet heavy tank is going to go through your armour like a hot knife through butter. That is not guaranteed to happen if they're shooting at the front of this tank. Armour gives you options. Options that you don't have in tanks that rely on mobility, if you're not good enough to take advantage of that mobility. And that's Ace Tanker in the Thunderbolt 7. I like this tank because I'm not great at World of Tanks. And I suspect, if we're being honest here, the majority of people watching this video are also fully aware that they're not great at World of Tanks either. Having that armour gives you options in this machine. You can afford to make mistakes and not immediately get punished for it the way that you do in, well, most other American medium tanks. So I have no hesitations whatsoever in recommending the Thunderbolt 7 to people who play American medium tanks, do not already own a premium American medium tank, and want to use this tank for training the crews of your American medium tanks. It is just a tier 6 premium, it's not a tier 8 premium, so while it's not going to earn as many credits as a tier 8 premium, it's also not going to break the bank the way a tier 8 premium would. Now I don't know exactly how much this tank is going to cost. Those details haven't actually been made available to me yet, but if you go to the premium shop and just have a look at how much other tier 6 premiums cost, you can see the Skoda T40 costs less than £13 sterling. The Japanese heavy tank number 6 costs just over £13 sterling. It's very likely that this is going to be a very, very affordable premium tank. So, as a Joe average World of Tanks player, I have absolutely no hesitation whatsoever in recommending the Thunderbolt 7. If, like me, you know that you're not that good at World of Tanks, but you're good enough to know greatness when you see it, you're going to be able to do very, very well in this machine. No hesitation whatsoever in giving it a full recommendation. And that's pretty much it for today. Well, almost, because tonight I'm going to be joining Quickie Baby for a live stream. Yes, I'm going to be humiliating myself by playing next to a Unicum for a few hours again. I won't be there the whole night, but I'll be joining him at 6 PM UK time, and we're just going to be having some fun playing tanks. So that's Quickie Baby's live stream. I'm sure most of you already know where it is, but just on the off chance that you don't, details down below in the video description. And that is definitely it for today. So I hope you enjoyed today's review of the Thunderbolt 7 Premium Tier 6 American Medium Tank, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.